Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be taking a look at characters from the modern day storyline of Assassin's Creed that seem to have been either forgotten by the writers and or have disappeared completely from the narrative. First, I should explain the parameters for what I am considering a forgotten character. 1. The character needs to be alive as of the recording of this video, which is in February of 2024. Obviously, if a character died years ago, it makes sense that they don't appear in the narrative anymore and that they're maybe not mentioned all that much because they haven't been alive for a long time. So characters such as Lucy, Clay, Hannah, Alan Rickon, Warren Vidic, Violet DaCosta, none of them are counting for this video. Second, the character needs to have been missing from the narrative for a while now. I had a think and I've decided that the cutoff for this is 2018. 2018 was the year that the Uprising comics wrapped up and Odyssey released. I know that was only 5 years ago, but we've had 2 mainline game entries, plus Nexus, a bunch of novels, a webtoon, various other transmedia content in that time. So in my opinion, if a character hasn't appeared or been referenced anywhere during that time, they have been forgotten. We also have to consider the fact that it's entirely possible that we aren't going to get an Assassin's Creed game this year. We may get Red towards the end of the year, but we may not get it until the beginning of 2025. And even when Red comes out, it's entirely possible, if not highly likely, that it won't have any modern day content. If the Infinity platform is also not up and running before next year, and it's beginning to look that way, it could be 2025 before we see any modern day content at all. By which point it will have been 7 years since Odyssey released, so I think 2018 is a fair cutoff. I'll give you a quick rundown of who will not be appearing in this video for that reason. Sean and Rebecca last appeared in AC Nexus back in November of 2023. William Miles appeared in Mirage in October of 2023. Mitsuko Nakamura appeared in the Forgotten Temple webtoon in May of 2023. Otzelberg was referenced in Valhalla in 2020. Gavin Banks, Michelle Lemaire, and Agneta Reader appeared in the AC Gold audiobook in 2020, and Kiyoshi Takakura, Saiko Mochizuki, and Ellen Kay all appeared in the Blade of Xiaojun manga in 2019. As such, they are, for now, not forgotten. Not yet, anyway. I've also got to define what I'm counting as a character. There are a lot of Abstergo employees that are named throughout the series but we know nothing about, and they usually only appear in email chains. People like Caroline Gray, James Morse, or Evan Dean. We'd be here all day if I included them, and trust me, this is already a really long video. As such, I'm only including characters that actually have had some relevance at some point. These Abstergo workers are really only used to kind of flesh out the world rather than being significant to the story in any way, so I'm just not going to include them. But with that out of the way, let's get into the video. So I'm going to start by looking at the assassin characters, and first up we have Paul Bellamy. Paul Bellamy was a character who appeared in the Subject 4 graphic novel. He was part of the same assassin cell as Hannah Mueller. Hannah brought a man back to the assassin hideout believing him to be an assassin too, although he couldn't remember anything about where he had come from. Paul continued to push the man for answers, noting that he had an assassin insignia tattooed on his arm. But the man continued to deflect until he eventually had a strange vision of an ancestor. The man struggled with these visions for the next few days until eventually he had a moment of clarity. He was sure of his purpose. He had to find the mentor of the Brotherhood. That man was Daniel Cross. Unbeknownst to the assassins or Daniel himself, Daniel had a chip implanted in his brain by Abstergo when he was younger. Functioning as a sleeper agent, Daniel's impulse would be triggered when he came face to face with the mentor. As per Abstergo's instructions, Daniel killed the mentor, ultimately beginning what is known in the AC universe as the Great Purge. Having heard about what happened to the mentor, Paul evacuated his assassin cell, but he was tracked down by Abstergo a year later. Paul was forced into a coma and placed into an animus so Abstergo could search through his genetic memories. Despite being canonically alive, although unconscious, Paul has never appeared in the series again, nor have we ever found out what happened to him or what Abstergo found in his memories. Erudito do imply that Paul Bellamy was related to Aveline de Grandpré. which may be where Abstergo got her memories for Assassin's Creed Liberation. But other than that, we know nothing about Paul's life post-2001. Considering how long ago he disappeared from the narrative, and that the Assassins have little reason to discuss Daniel Cross at this point, considering he died in 2012, I think it's unlikely that we'll ever get any more information on Paul. It's also entirely possible that he's dead, considering he was captured by Abstergo over 2 decades ago now. Next up, we're going to look at the crew of the Altair 2, who seem to have completely vanished at this point, despite once being the core modern-day cast. For anyone who isn't aware, and I won't be offended if you don't, trying to come up with the transmedia in this franchise is a full-time job, believe me, I know. The Altair 2 is a ship that also functions as an assassin hideout. It was the primary location for the AC Initiate storyline. In 2018, it was given to Layla Cell so that they could reach Santorini in search of Atlantis. Whatever happened to the crew who previously inhabited the ship and Initiates is totally unknown, so I'm going to bring attention to them now. Susan Drayton. Susan is the captain of the Altair 2 and a member of the Canadian Brotherhood. She was recruited into the Assassins after breaking into the water supply in her hometown of Prince George, British Columbia, to steal a sample of the new fluoride, one of Abstergo's big schemes/scandals from 2012. Sean mentions it in 82, it was a whole thing. Susan was planning to give information about the chemical to the press, but she was arrested when she left the building. She was saved by Janice, another member of the Canadian Brotherhood, and asked to join the Assassins. Susan then went on to steal a ship, which would become the Altair 2, so that she could chase down Japanese whalers, but Gavin convinced her to turn the ship into a mobile assassin hideout. Since she was captain of the ship, Susan wasn't involved in a lot of footwork during Initiates, usually just remaining on the boat, but she's passionate and devoted to the cause and has strong principles that she will fight for, and Gavin trusted her implicitly during their time together. But Susan hasn't been seen or mentioned since the Initiate storyline ended in 2014, and we don't know what she's up to these days. Emmanuel Barraza. Emmanuel is a former soldier who functioned as the armourer and weapons master of the Altair 2. Despite that, Manny is not a violent man. During the early 2000s, in the midst of the US War on Terror, Manny was tasked with finding Templars within the military, as President George W. Bush was known to be a Templar puppet. However, what Manny discovered was a bus of school children who had bombs strapped to them. The children were going to be driven to a peace talk meeting where the bombs would be detonated, killing everyone at the event. Manny felt that his only option was to kill the children to protect the peace talks, even though that meant breaking the first tenet of the creed, stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent. This act traumatized Manny, and he swore to never take another human life. Instead, he chose to acquire weapons for the Assassins and train recruits on how to use them effectively. Manny was sent to the Altair 2 cell by William Miles, something that Manny resents him for, feeling that Bill was just trying to get rid of him. During a mission in Japan, Kiyoshi pulled a hidden blade on Gavin, which Manny blocked with his hand, allowing Kiyoshi to put the blade straight through his palm. Kiyoshi complimented Manny on his ability to handle pain. Despite this, a rift developed between Gavin and Manny, as Gavin believed that Manny had not been doing his job properly and failed to protect him. On New Year's Eve 2013, Manny went to a karaoke bar with Kiyoshi and Stephanie and sang a song, though he threatened to break his vow of pacifism and kill Stephanie if she ever showed anyone the video. Emmanuel was part of a small team that travelled to Moscow and met Galina, as well as infiltrating the Protvino assassin laboratory, though he refused to participate in the killing. During the Initiate infiltration aboard the Altair 2, William strongly suspected Manny of being the mole, to which Manny replied, "I'm loyal to the Brotherhood. I'm loyal past the point of common sense, so kill me or get out of my face, sir." I really liked Emmanuel. I think his backstory is really interesting. His connection with the US War on Terror, his trauma and decision to become a pacifist assassin, which doesn't, really make sense. And the fact that despite all of that, he stayed devoted to the Assassins, even though William had let him down so many times. I would love to know where he is now, but like Susan, we haven't heard anything about him since 2014. Emmett Leary. Emmett is the Altair 2's answer to Rebecca Crane, in that he's an elite hacker who likes to smoke weed, using it as a medication for his arthritis. Emmett previously worked at Abstergo as a software engineer for the Surrogate Initiative, which was, as Eileen Block put it, the poorer cousin of the Animus Project. The Surrogate Initiative was researching technology that would allow people to access memories from anyone, whether there was a genetic link or not, which would eventually become possible in 2013 with the data dump scanner. When Eileen's project was shut down, Emmett was asked to join the Animus Project instead, but he refused as he thought that Vidic was a madman, which he was. Emmett chose to leave Abstergo and received a large severance package in exchange for his silence about everything he learned while he worked there. Despite this, Emmett never felt safe and was convinced Abstergo were coming for him. And he was right. But thankfully, Gavin managed to intervene and save Emmett from Abstergo agents who had been sent to kill him. Emmett chose to leave with Gavin, in his underwear no less, and joined the Assassins. He was henceforth considered dead to the rest of the world. Emmett was part of the team who journeyed to the Protvino laboratory and was horrified by Galena's slaughter of the other assassins. He was also disturbed by seeing Juno's face on the computer monitors. When Sean and Rebecca arrived on the Altair 2, Emmett quickly bonded with Rebecca over the Hephaestus network and their love of marijuana. They also discovered that there were spies aboard the ship. Emmett's other adventures with the Brotherhood include getting high and talking to a lamp, buying a load of Japanese snacks while visiting Osaka for a mission, and going on a 2-day bender with a mix of weed and Japanese corn syrup. The last we heard of him was that he was going to Paris to set up the Helix servers for a new assassin base, the one that we see in AC Unity. Despite being one of the most fun characters introduced in Initiates, we haven't heard about Emmett since November of 2014. I would love to see him return. He's such an enjoyable character. Dr. Stephanie Chu. Stephanie, or Chewie as her teammates call her, was born in Beijing and raised to follow a specific path that her parents planned for her. Stephanie was to become a doctor and work in the family business, so she was sent to an Abstergo-funded university and gained a degree in medicine, biological and chemical engineering, and a postdoctoral fellowship in membrane technology. But deep down, Stephanie didn't want to work for her family's business and felt that there were bigger and better things out there for her. She expanded her studies into information security and network science and planned to get a job working for Abstergo, seeing them as the pinnacle of technological advancement. However, this perception was shattered when Stephanie discovered her father was the creator of new fluoride, the chemical that had caused illness all over China. Abstergo started chasing down the Chu family and Stephanie fled to Hong Kong in fear of her life. There, she was picked up by Gavin and Susan and brought onto the Altair 2, where she agreed to join the Brotherhood and became the ship's medic. In May of 2014, Rebecca discovered that there was a spy aboard the Altair 2 who was uploading reports to a database by a group calling themselves the Initiates. William figured out that Stephanie was the spy and ordered Galena to kill her. However, she was stopped when Eric jumped in front of Stephanie and attempted to take the blame. Bill revealed that he was only messing with them and was actually impressed by their work and their ethos. Stephanie and Eric went on to show Sean and Rebecca their outer net, which Rebecca was very impressed by, saying that she hadn't seen anything like it since before the Great Purge. Sean later used this network to send out a rallying cry to all the initiates around the world on the 16th of June 2014, asking them to join the assassin cause. Unfortunately, like the others we've discussed, Stephanie hasn't appeared in the franchise since the Initiate story ended in 2014. Eric Cooper. Okay, I'm so excited for this one because I love this character. Eric was born and raised in Scotland, either in or around Edinburgh, and he's a transgender man. Eric was in a relationship, but his partner was murdered by a hate group in an anti-LGBT attack. Eric hunted down every member of the group and murdered them before contemplating taking his own life. But before he got the chance, he was found by Gavin, who recruited him into the Assassins and gave his life purpose again. Aboard the Altair 2, Eric functions as the ship's navigator. He formed a close friendship with Stephanie and Emmett, with Emmett giving Eric updates on what was happening back in Scotland via the Assassin networks. During the Japan mission, Eric formed a bond with Psycho and aided her and Susan in cleaning up the ship. Psycho then gave Eric and Susan homemade toshikoshi soba as a thank you. During the spy interrogations, Eric revealed to William that he had experienced a lot of discrimination in his life and that it had a profound effect on him. He also told Bill that he'd undergone numerous surgeries in order to transition and is on testosterone. As I mentioned, Eric turned out to be one of the spies, being the one who wrote the reports, but Bill chose to keep him in the Brotherhood. Eric is one of the few Initiate characters who has appeared in the narrative after 2014. In November 2015, in the Syndicate Jack the Ripper DLC, Bishop receives an email from Eric expressing his concerns about the Initiates if Bishop drags them into the Assassin Templar War. He also reveals that he doesn't like Jazz Deep, which is quite funny, because who does like Jazz Deep, honestly? I love Eric. He's Scottish and he's trans. How could I not love him? Sadly, we don't know if he ever got to return to Edinburgh and have a normal life like he always wanted, because that email in Syndicate is the last we ever heard of him. Nodar and Akaki Ninidzi. Nodar and Akaki are a pair of brothers from Georgia, the country, not the state. Nodar was a sumo wrestler, but he chose to quit the sport due to politics and corruption, whilst Akaki was the head of his own assassin-like group, trying to stop conflict in his country. Due to how similar Akaki's group looked to the actual Assassin Brotherhood, they attracted the attention of the Templars. Nodar arrived home one day to find his younger brother in the middle of a fight with the Templar agents. Gavin arrived in Georgia to free the freedom fighters and told them about the Assassin Templar War. Akaki and Nodar were inspired by the story and decided to join the Brotherhood, with Nodar becoming the chief steward on the Altair II and Akaki the chief engineer. On Christmas Day 2013, Nodar cooked the crew of the Altair II a dinner. Akaki wanted to know how Nodar smuggled a turkey aboard, but Nodar just smiled. He then poured everyone some alcohol that he and Akaki had brewed themselves aboard the ship. Later that month, whilst in Tokyo, Nodar paid $300 for a meal cooked by the last living master sushi chef. Akaki, on the other hand, bought a bunch of classic samurai movies to screen at the Altair II movie night. Nodar and Akaki were last mentioned in an email in the Jack the Ripper DLC in 2015, where Aaron claims to have tried to contact them but hasn't received a response. As a result, we have no idea where the brothers are, what happened to them, or why they were unable to respond to Aaron's messages. And at this point, we probably never will know. We're now going to talk about an Initiate's character who did make it out of 2015, but who has since disappeared from the canon. And it is, of course, Galina Voronina. Galina is one of only 2 characters introduced in Initiates to make the full transition into the mainline game series, making her game debut in Syndicate. She also went on to be one of the main characters in the Assassin's Creed and AC Uprising comic book series. Galina and her twin sister Avdotya were born in Moscow, Russia, to their mother, Medea. Medea was an assassin scientist who lived and worked in the Protvino laboratory, where she also raised her daughters. Galina and Avdotya were raised in the Assassin Brotherhood, but had to witness many horrors growing up. Their mother was always carrying out experiments which went terribly wrong. The subjects that she placed in her animus went insane and had to be locked away inside the lab. Having run out of candidates, Medea used herself as a subject, but the bleeding effect drove her crazy. The 2012 solar flare incident caused Medea to see a vision of Eve, which only made her more determined and more unstable. Galina desperately tried to contact the other assassin groups to get help for her family, but it was to no avail. In June 2013, the Russian government announced that they would be taking over the Protvino laboratory. Galina and Avdotya were forced into the Animus. Galina managed to maintain most of her sanity and learned the fighting skills of her ancestors, but Avdotya slowly went mad like the others. In 2014, Galina finally managed to make contact with Gavin and asked his cell to assassinate Medea. By the time Galina returned to the lab, it was overrun by the assassins who'd been driven mad, including Avdotya, her twin sister. Galina was forced to kill everyone, including her sister. She then finally put her mother out of her misery before joining the Altair II crew. Since then, Galina has been involved in a variety of assassin missions. She attacked the Abstergo lab in Paris in 2014 and infiltrated the London Vault in 2015 with Sean and Rebecca. After the London mission, she was assigned to a new cell in California with Xavier Chen and Cody Adams. She was also responsible for recruiting Charlotte Dela Cruz into the Brotherhood. Over the next 2 years, Galina was involved in numerous missions alongside Charlotte, including being present for the ultimate demise of the series-long villain Juno. She also finally put a bullet in Jazz Deep's head, saving us all from his bullshit. The last time we saw Galina was in the final issue of AC Uprising. In Odyssey, it stated that no one has really seen or heard from Galina since Charlotte's death. the pain leading Galena to drink herself into a stupor and refuse to talk to anyone. She's presumably still with the assassins, but we haven't seen or heard anything about her since then. Galena is a great character. While she didn't completely lose her sanity in the way that her colleagues at the Protvino lab did, she is most definitely not stable. Rebecca commented that she once encountered Galena talking to herself, only for Galena to reveal that she was talking to her dead sister. She's also just very unhinged and erratic in her actions and an absolutely ruthless fighter. She also, according to the Uprising comics, once killed 3 Templar agents with a scented candle. Girl is wild. As forgotten characters go, I think Galena is the one we are most likely to see again sometime. She was a big deal for a few years there, and it would be a really wasted opportunity to not bring her back. But for now, her status and whereabouts remain a mystery. Moving away from Initiates now into a character who was once considered one of the leading characters in the modern day, but seems to have really faded into the background. We're talking about Harlan T. Cunningham. Harlan actually made his debut in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, though you would be excused for not realising it. Remember the end of Brotherhood when there were 2 voices trying to secure Desmond into the Animus? One of those was Bill Miles, and the other was Harlan. Not a lot is known about Harlan's early life, as Gavin deliberately erased most of the records. What we do know is that Harlan grew up in Texas and was a wrestler in high school, but suffered discrimination when people found out that he was gay. He decided to leave America and move to Italy, where he joined the Italian Brotherhood and was assigned to Adriano Maestrani's cell in Florence, which we hear about through emails in Brotherhood and in Initiates. Harlan aided Desmond's cell after Desmond fell unconscious at the end of Brotherhood and helped them escape Italy during the events of Revelations. In late 2013, Harlan's cell infiltrated an Abstergo building in Italy and destroyed the servers. Unfortunately, the Templars tracked the cell back to their hideout in Florence, and it was attacked the next day. Harlan was the only person to make it out. All the other assassins were killed, and Adriano set off a bomb to destroy the hideout and all of the information inside. Harlan confirmed that all the Templar agents were dead except for 2 who managed to escape, and those 2 were Johanny Otzelberg and Sorkin. 2 days later, Harlan informed Bill that he was going dark. The next month, Harlan was in a safe house in Vienna when he resurfaced, and Gavin sent him to Rotterdam to await his next mission. That was the last we heard until February 2014, when Harlan and his now partner Aaron Schutt infiltrated an Abstergo facility in Rotterdam and stole the precursor box. They had a run-in with Sigma Team and managed to take a few of them out, but were forced to abandon the box to save their own lives. Otzelberg had once again escaped them, though he put both Harlan and Aaron on Sigma Team's most wanted list, alongside Bill, Gavin, Sean, and Rebecca. In 2015, Harlan and Aaron got married. Yay them! But their honeymoon was disrupted by Bishop asking them to search for Grammatica's laboratory. After that, Harlan kinda disappeared from the story, whilst Aaron went on to be a main character in Uprising. The last we heard from Harlan was in 2018 during Odyssey when he exchanged a few emails with Layla. I really liked Harlan, and I thought it was a damn shame that Aaron got to become one of the main characters in Uprising and Harlan didn't even appear, except for that one phone call with Aaron when they were talking about a chihuahua. I would love to see him come back and get a physical presence, and I would love to see him and Aaron get some proper content together, considering they're a couple and we deserve it. Harlan, as characters go, deserves a comeback more than most. Aaron Schutt Cunningham. Aaron Schutt, or Aaron Schutt Cunningham as he's now known, is a Dutch assassin and Harlan's husband. Aaron had a similar youth to his husband, as he was a champion mixed martial artist but left the sport after he came out as gay and experienced discrimination. When they met, they instantly formed a bond and Harlan brought Aaron into the Assassins. In addition to the missions he went on with Harlan, Aaron also had adventures on his own in the Uprising comics. He and Kiyoshi were sent to rescue Galena's cell in Argentina, and after that he became part of her team attempting to shut down the Phoenix Project and find the Koh-i-Noor diamond. Honestly, a lot happened in the Uprising comics, and it's too much for me to go through here, so just trust me that Aaron is a great character and we deserve to see him again. Like Harlan, the last time we heard about Aaron was from the emails in Odyssey. Presumably him and Harlan are out there somewhere fighting the good fight, but where and what they're up to is anyone's guess. Now we move on to a character that I have been dying to talk about. It's possible that she is the most hated character in the entire modern day canon, but I am fascinated by her. We are talking about Bishop. Bishop was introduced in AC Unity, but admittedly, it was a very weird introduction. If you aren't big on transmedia, you might assume that she had come from Initiates or a comic book or something, but she didn't. Bishop was a brand new character who was somehow now the one who speaks directly to the player, despite the fact that the player has no idea who she is. She's also working alongside Sean, but Rebecca is strangely absent. Side note that when Unity released, people thought that Bishop was Rebecca and she was just using a code name and they changed the voice actors, but Bishop actually mentions Rebecca in her dialogue, so that obviously wasn't the case. And to this day, we still don't know why the writers didn't include Rebecca in Unity and used Bishop instead, but that's a discussion for another day. Bishop's remember the new guy introduction and total lack of a character was somewhat lampshaded in Syndicate. And apologies if you don't speak TV tropes, because that sentence won't have made any sense. But anyway, in Syndicate's database, Sean talks about how he knows nothing about Bishop. Nobody does. No one knows where she came from or how she joined the Assassins. All her records have been wiped. Bishop is also stated to be in charge of the Initiates program, which Sean and Rebecca aren't particularly happy about since William gave the program to them at the end of the Initiates storyline. Bishop is the liaison between the Assassins and the Initiate, aka the player, in Unity and Syndicate, and seems to have a friendship with Sean and Rebecca, despite the issue around her taking their jobs. The last we hear from her is in the Jack the Ripper DLC, where she reaches out to the other Assassins and tells them that their new goal is to find Grammatica's lab and get the shroud back. Since then, she hasn't been seen or mentioned by anyone in the narrative. What I enjoy about Bishop is the mystery surrounding her character, which I always assumed would eventually be revealed in the story. Sean says that everyone has a theory on her background. Gavin thinks she's former CIA, and Harlan thinks she's an Erudito defector. Allegedly, Rebecca knows the truth, but she pinky promised not to tell anyone. I honestly find her so interesting. I think the fact that she doesn't have a proper backstory was probably, like I say, I think that was written in and put in the database to kind of poke fun at the fact that they'd introduced her in Unity with no explanation of who she was. So then in Syndicate they're kind of like, oh, it's actually because no one knows who she is. We couldn't tell you who she is because no one knows who she is. But I think that's funny, but all that does is make me desperate to know who she is. Like, I want to know the truth. And it's annoying that we never got that answer and that she's never appeared again for us to even, like, speculate. I want to know. I want to know the story. Who the hell was Bishop? Give me the information. She is fascinating to me. Alana Ryan. Moving on to our final assassin on the list, Alana Ryan. In a way, I feel like calling Alana a forgotten character is a bit disingenuous because she was barely a known character to begin with. Alana's only appearance in the AC universe is in Odyssey, and she doesn't even have a character model, just a voice. Alana is said to be from Boston, Massachusetts, and was recruited by Bill Miles in 2017. Layla asked her to come along on the mission to Quebec due to her knowledge of ancient documents and church construction, but she had to do this remotely as she was still in training. Similarly, she joined Layla remotely in the search for the Spear of Leonidas in Atlantis. Alana communicates with Layla through an earpiece later in the game and in the DLCs. In Valhalla, however, it's confirmed that Layla's former team are no longer on good terms with her after Layla accidentally killed Victoria. It's hinted in Odyssey that Alana is a descendant of Shay Cormac, which is probably the most interesting fact we learn about her. I don't know if she'll ever reappear. I don't really know why they wrote her in the first place instead of just using a character that we already had. I've just listed a bunch of characters that have, disappeared from the narrative, and instead of using any one of them, they just created a new random character with barely any information just to be... It's no wonder that people complain about the modern day. Like, instead of using characters we know and love, they just write in random characters, give them no story, and then just make them deliver pointless dialogue. This isn't the video for that. My point is, I don't know if we'll ever see Alana again, because I'm not entirely sure why she was ever a character to begin with. And before we completely leave behind the Assassins, I want to talk about one more character. Desmond's mother. Desmond's mother is a very minor character in the series. She doesn't even have a canonical name, but she is obviously important considering she is the mother of Desmond Miles, our original modern-day protagonist. Despite never being named, she does have a voice and speaks during the Desmond's Journey section of Revelations. We know that she's an assassin, she's the wife of William Miles, and that she is a descendant of Altair. as well as having Egyptian, Japanese, Taiwanese, and French ancestry. She lived with William and Desmond at the farm, along with other assassin families. When Desmond ran away at 16, he said that he could hear his mother screaming for him to come back, and that was the last time he ever saw her. After the farm was raided by Abstergo in 2012, William and his wife went separate ways to hide from the Templars, and we've not been told what happened to her since. Whether her relationship with Bill survived the death of their son is unknown, as are her feelings about having a grandson that she wasn't aware of. Back in the day, I always believed that we would eventually meet Desmond's mother, but I think the ship might have sailed on that one, unfortunately. I mean, possibly not. Bill is one of the few characters still present in the series, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Now let's move on to the forgotten Templars of the series, starting with the General of the Cross. We know almost nothing about this character, which is why they are so fascinating. It was revealed during Assassin's Creed Unity that the highest ranking individual within the hierarchy of the Templar Order is a person known as the General of the Cross. This role is different from the Grand Master, which was Alan Rickon. The General is supported by 3 Templars known as Guardians, and the General presides over decisions made by these Guardians. The General outranks the Inner Sanctum, and the Inner Sanctum are not aware of the General's identity. Only the Guardians know who it is. We have never found out anything else about this character, but their existence completely changes what we previously assumed about the hierarchy of the Templars. They are such an important character in the grand scheme of things, and we haven't heard about them since 2014. I would love to know more about them, their Guardians, the decisions that they've made, who they are, how they are connected to the greater narrative, and what sort of impact they have been having behind the scenes this whole time. But who knows if we'll ever get that. Letitia England. Letitia is the head of the Operations Division at Abstergo's Philadelphia office, which, unsurprisingly, also makes her a high-ranking Templar within the Inner Sanctum. She was introduced in AC Brotherhood's multiplayer, of all places, where she recruited Otso Berg into the Templars. Letitia wanted Berg to become a super soldier who would wipe out the assassins. She had Daniel Cross put a microchip in Berg's arm so that she could track him at all times. Letitia was also involved in a plan to capture Bill Miles whilst he was posing as a guide for a group of school children. Berg refused to attack Bill if it put the children at risk, which Letitia was not impressed about, leading her to threaten the life of Berg's daughter. Over the years, Letitia has appeared or been referenced in a variety of AC media. Documents and initiates reveal that she called Vidic panicking about Desmond breaking into the New York Abstergo building. Her thoughts on Abstergo Entertainment's work appear in Black Flag and Rogue. She appears in the secret modern-day cutscene at the end of Chronicles Russia, as well as in the novel Assassin's Creed Heresy. Her last appearance was in 2017 during the Uprising comics when the Black Cross questioned the Inner Sanctum about a cell within their ranks which was threatening the Order. Since then, Letitia has not made another appearance or been mentioned in any material, which makes you wonder what she's getting up to these days. Presumably she's still alive and still working at Abstergo, so what could she be plotting next? It would be interesting to see what she's doing now, especially considering the rest of her team, Daniel Cross, Isabelle Ardant, and Otto Schmidt, are all dead. Where is she? And how is she doing, having no team left? I want to know. Sophia Rickon. Sophia Rickon, not Riken, was introduced in the AC Heresy novel as Alan Rickon's daughter and head of the Abstergo Foundation Rehabilitation Centre in Madrid. She then went on to be a main character in the 2016 Assassin's Creed movie. Sophia was 4 years old when her mother was killed by an assassin, and then spent her childhood alone and sad as her father prevented her from spending time with other children. Sophia was the one who recruited Layla onto the Abstergo Young Innovators program, and they became good friends, although they later fell out when Sophia prevented Layla from joining the Animus program, saying she was too unpredictable and transgressive. In the movie, Sophia performs a sort of Lucy-type role to Callum, a captured assassin who Abstergo are using to track down the Apple of Eden. Alan Rickon states that Sophia is more scientist than Templar, implying that she isn't particularly devoted to the Order and is more concerned with the advancement of technology. Sophia's goal was stated to be creating a more peaceful society by using science and ESU technology to eradicate violence. Despite all this, when Sophia's father is killed, she vows to track down his killer. Unfortunately, despite her being set up as a major character and possibly the new big bad now that Alan is dead, we haven't seen Sophia Rickon since the movie, and the only appearance that she has had was in Layla's emails in Origins, and all of those emails actually took place before 2016, before the movie. So we have no idea what's happened to her since her father died, and we likely never will, which is a real shame. Sorkin. Sorkin is a Templar agent and one of the members of Sigma team who works closely with Otto Berg and is generally seen as his right-hand man. Sorkin survived the explosion in the Florentine assassin safe house with Otto Berg, and in 2014, Sorkin was tasked with hunting down Arend whilst Otto Berg went after Harlan. Arend managed to overpower Sorkin and used him as a human shield. Sorkin was shot by a sniper, but he survived. As if that wasn't bad enough, a few months later he was wounded again, this time by Galena during the assassin attack on the Paris facility. Galena stabbed Sorkin 7 times and left him for dead, but somehow, once again, he survived. The man is indestructible. The last time we heard about Sorkin was in a conversation between Otto Berg and Violet DaCosta during Rogue in 2014. He was alive then, but we have no idea where he's been for the last 9 years. Considering we only ever knew of 3 members of Sigma team in the first place, and one of them is now dead, I think it would be good to bring Sorkin back. Otherwise, it's just Berg, and that's not much of a Sigma team. That's just a Sigma male. And that's a whole other kettle of fish right there. Dr. Sung. Dr. Sung is an Abstergo doctor who was assigned to care for Daniel Cross over the years that he came in and out of the Abstergo facilities. In 2000, she injected him with a truth serum that would cause him to reveal what he had learned about the assassins during the time that he'd spent with them. This information is what ultimately led to the Great Purge. Sung was ordered to inject Daniel with an even higher dose of the drug, which she refused to do, as she was afraid of what it would do to Daniel. But she changed her mind when Stearns reminded her that they can easily kill her. That is very much the Abstergo way. If they're not going to do what you say, then just threaten to kill them. They will comply. Sung was the one who monitored Daniel's Animus sessions in 2002 and explained the bleeding effect to him. She also told him that Abstergo considered him family, which may or may not have been utter bullshit. 10 years later, in 2012, Sung was still looking after Daniel, trying to manage his deteriorating mental state. In November of that year, Daniel escaped the Philadelphia facility, for which Sung blamed herself. A week later, Vidic told Sung that he was removing her as Daniel's doctor and would be taking over the care himself, and that was the last time we heard about her. It's entirely possible that Sung has been killed in the decade since we last saw her, since she was quite defiant for an Abstergo employee, or maybe she just saw sense and made a run for it. It's likely we'll never know. Melanie LeMay. Melanie LeMay was introduced in AC Black Flag as the CCO of Abstergo Entertainment and was the one who showed the player character around the building and routinely checked in on their progress. At that point in time, Melanie was just a regular employee, though she got caught up in the Templar assassin funny business going on at the time. She found a picture of Juno in the Pirates of Nightmares game created by Abstergo Entertainment. Then she was left in charge of the company when the then CCO Oliver Garneau went missing on a trip to Philadelphia. While she was running the place, Melanie had to deal with someone hacking into the company computer system, which, unbeknownst to her, was the very employee she had just brought in. Melanie locked members of the Subject 17 team in the bunker while she tried to identify the culprit, but security eventually discovered John Standish trying to poison the new employee. Assumed to be the hacker, John was shot and killed, and Melanie apologised to the employee. However, having coped with all this craziness and competently running the company whilst Oliver was missing, Melanie was brought into the Templar Order by the Inner Sanctum and given the permanent position as CCO of Abstergo Entertainment. After that, she became involved in Letitia and Grammatica's search for the Isu artifacts and sages. She continued working on video games at Abstergo Entertainment and working with new recruits, and you can see a lot of her thoughts and opinions in the Abstergo Entertainment Employee Handbook. She also worked closely with Otto Berg and Violet DaCosta when the player character of Rogue unleashed a virus into the Abstergo Entertainment computer system, and stood by Berg's side when he gave the character the ultimatum of joining the Templars or dying. Since then, Melanie has been mentioned a couple of times, both in Syndicate and the Heresy novel. The last we heard was in October 2016 when she hired Anaya Chaudhary as the Director of Information Security at Abstergo Entertainment Montreal. I always liked Melanie. She's upbeat and cheerful and seemed to genuinely care about her employees. That said, she seemed to have become a harder person once she was brought into the Templars, not that that's surprising. I don't know if it's possible to be a happy Templar, really. But that's why I find her so interesting. To see a character start outside of the Order as a happy, contented person and then watch them change once they become part of the Templars, I would have loved to see more of her and to dive into her experience and her feelings on her life now. Presumably she's still working at Abstergo, so she might reappear, but I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't. Alfred Stearns. Alfred is a now retired Abstergo employee and member of the Inner Sanctum. He was the previous head of operations before Letitia took over. Back in 2000, Alfred was in charge of the Great Purge of the Assassins, which featured in the Subject 4 comics. We didn't see him again until 2016, when he appeared in AC Heresy at a number of meetings with Simon and the Inner Sanctum. He then appeared at the Black Cross meeting and Uprising in 2017, although he didn't say much. Considering Alfred's now in his 90s, I think if he ever does get brought up in the story again, it will probably be just to say that he died. Simon Hathaway. Simon was introduced as the protagonist of the AC Heresy novel. He is a British Templar historian, i.e. the Order's equivalent of Sean, and works as the head of the Historical Research Division within Abstergo. He's also a member of the Inner Sanctum. Simon was born into the Order as his parents and grandmother were all Templars. He attended Cambridge in his youth and went on to gain a position at Abstergo. He worked closely with Isabel Ardon, and so after she was killed in 2015, Simon was given her position. Simon had a theory that the Sword of Eden that had been the subject of AC Unity was damaged, and that by exploring the memories of his ancestor, he could find out how to fix the sword and use it correctly. And this serves as the bulk of Heresy's narrative. Later, Simon appeared at the Black Cross meeting in the Uprising comics as a member of the Inner Sanctum. We also find out in Origins that Layla had worked with Simon while at Abstergo, which is the most recent mention of Simon that we have. As the main character of Heresy, Simon had more character development than most Abstergo employees in the series, and yet he hasn't appeared in the series since 2017, which is a shame. It feels like he could do so much more. I'd love to see Sean and him face off in a battle of the British academic historians. Hopefully we'll see him again in the future. David Kilkerman. Kilkerman is actually one of the first Templars we ever meet in the series. Back in AC1, there's a moment when 3 high-level Abstergo employees stare at Desmond through a window. It's very unsettling. The man in the middle is David Kilkerman. Since then, Kilkerman has appeared sporadically throughout the series. He's mentioned in an email in the Subject 4 comics, and then in the Heresy novel in 2016. In the novel, Kilkerman agreed with Alan Rickon that Simon Hathaway had committed treason against the Order. Most recently, Kilkerman appeared in an issue of the Uprising comics where he attended the Inner Sanctum meeting called by the Black Cross. Despite being one of the first Inner Sanctum members we ever see, Kilkerman has never had much impact in the story and very much exists in the background. He seems to appear whenever they show the full Inner Sanctum, so he may turn up again in the future, but it feels like his potential in the story is kind of wasted. Henry Lyman. Henry is quite possibly the biggest example of a forgotten character on the list. Aside from Rickon and Kilkerman, Henry Lyman is the third Abstergo executive we see through the window in AC1. This is his only appearance in the entire series, and we don't even know what his position is within Abstergo, so that's all I can tell you. This character has not appeared or been mentioned since AC1 in 2007, 16 years ago. I don't think it gets much more forgotten than that. Nancy Nylop. Nancy Nylop is another character who appeared in AC1, though not in person. Nancy was the one that Lucy emailed requesting information about her friend Layla's suicide. Nancy refused to provide this information. Nancy also received email from Alan Rickon about a First Civilization statue. Nancy appeared in the Subject 4 comics and in Initiates, but we have no information on her after 2012. Much like Henry, I think she might have been truly forgotten. AC Heresy characters. The Heresy novel introduced a metric fuck-ton of new Abstergo employees that have never been seen before and have not been mentioned since, so I'm just going to rattle through them all now. Anaya Chaudhary. Anaya is a Templar and the ex-girlfriend of Simon Hathaway. She used to work as a hacker at the Abstergo offices in Paris and London before being promoted to Director of Information Security at the Montreal office. For some reason, she later ended up moving to the Eyrie. Whilst in London, she assisted Simon with his adventures in the Animus and helped him uncover information about their colleagues working with Alan Rickon. Anaya has made one further appearance outside of Heresy in the Last Descendants series. At the Eyrie, she assisted Victoria Bibot with the Last Descendants kids and their hunt for the Pieces of Eden. The last time we saw her, she was having a weird interaction with Sean about the Trident of Eden. She has not been mentioned since. Andrew Davies. Anaya's colleague in the hacker team, Andrew is also secretly part of Omega Team, Alan Rickett's secret enforcement agents that even the Inner Sanctum aren't aware of. In October 2016, Andrew was tasked with keeping an eye on Simon Hathaway to ensure that he didn't find out what the Inner Sanctum were really up to. Andrew worked alongside his hacker team whilst also blocking Simon and Anaya's attempts to find out what Rickon was hiding. When Simon returned with the repaired sword, Rickon told Omega Team to stand down, but that he would be calling on their assistance again in the future. Andrew and Omega Team have not been mentioned since, which is a shame because I think it's really interesting that Sigma Team is not actually the ultimate enforcement group within Abstergo, which is what we previously assumed. But then, considering Omega Team were only known to Alan Rickon, and Alan Rickon's now dead, I guess that's a plot thread that's gonna go nowhere. Zachary Morgenstern. Zachary is Simon's friend who works in Abstergo's cryptology department. Simon doesn't know whether Zachary is a Templar or not, but he probably isn't. According to Simon, Zachary has a kind face, can talk your ear off, and loves analysing ancient graffiti. Max Dittmar. Max was another of the hackers at London Abstergo, working alongside Anaya, Andrew, and Benjamin. Rodrigo Lima. Rodrigo was Anaya's supervisor when she worked at London Abstergo, though he himself is Brazilian. He's described as the best kind of boss and believes in his employees. He was disappointed when Alan Rickon told him that he would need to lay off some staff. He also took his team out for dinner after Anaya was promoted and Benjamin took over her role. Benjamin Clark. Benjamin was Anaya's replacement in the hacker team after she was promoted to Director of Information Security. He has a master's degree in mathematics from MIT and has been working for Abstergo since 2014. He's described as an upbeat and polite person, though socially awkward and not the best with social norms. He's also known for being early for meetings, probably due to his anxiety. Amanda Sykebo. Amanda is the chief technician for the Animus 4.35 at Abstergo in London. She is present throughout Heresy, aiding Simon with his project in the Animus. Simon notes that she wears a Templar pin, but since you can buy them at the gift shop, he can't be sure whether that means she's a Templar or not. Poole. Poole is a waiter at the Tempest in a Teapot restaurant inside the Abstergo office building in London and a friend of Simon's. For reasons unknown to Simon, he disappeared from the building in October of 2016 and Simon never saw him again. We can only speculate as to what happened to him, or what he overheard whilst he was waiting tables. And finally, Lindsay. Lindsay is another waiter at the Tempest and she doesn't know where Poole went either. We now move on to some miscellaneous characters who are neither assassin nor Templar, but were important at one point and have since disappeared. First up, Milton Jones. No, not the British comedian. The AC Milton Jones is an Abstergo employee who also happens to be a descendant of Adewale from Black Flag and is the reason that Abstergo Entertainment had Adewale's DNA in order to make Freedom Cry. He's also stated to be a friend of Layla and Diana and was still working for Abstergo as of September 2017. Jot Sura. Jot is one of the few characters introduced in the Brahman comics who has not since died. Jot is a computer programmer who also happens to be the descendant of Raza Sura, the servant to the famous assassin Arbaz Mir, star of AC Chronicles India. After studying at the International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, Jot gained a position at Mysore Tech. In 2013, Jot began working on a virtual reality system known as Brahman VR, which is similar to the Animus in that it allows users to relive their ancestors' memories, and it funnels all of that information to Abstergo Entertainment to be data mined for their own software. Because of course. From using the Brahman VR, Jot discovered his connection to Raza Sura, as well as discovering his fiancée, the actress Monima Das, was descended from Princess Piara Kaur, Arbaz Mir's lover. This made Jot feel conflicted about his relationship with Monima due to their ancestors' history and their different ancestral backgrounds. Jot got himself into trouble when he told his colleague Siobhan that he was descended from Arbaz Mir. Unbeknownst to Jot, Siobhan was an assassin, and finding out that her colleague was descended from the very assassin known to have tracked down the Koh-i-Noor led to her kidnapping Jot and forcing him to use the Brahman VR to find the artifact. Of course, he wasn't actually descended from Mir and nothing could be gained from his time in the Brahman. Things got even more complicated when the Templars sent Otso Berg to capture Jot, killing Siobhan in the process. Jot fled to Monima's film studio, but both she and Jot were captured by Sigma Team. Jazdeep Dami, Siobhan's brother, chased down the van, but unfortunately the driver lost control and the van plunged into the Mithi River. Jasdeep managed to free Jot, but Monoma drowned in the river. Jasdeep and Jot then escaped to an assassin hideout, but this was then attacked too. Another assassin named Dinesh was killed, but Jot and Jasdeep escaped. Years later, it would be revealed that Jasdeep was an instrument of the First Will and was executed by Galena. Jot's whereabouts are unknown. Considering pretty much everyone from the Brahman story is dead now, I think it's unlikely that we'll ever see Jot again, especially since he never actually joined the Assassins. Presumably he just escaped and tried to rebuild his life as much as possible, and I hope he's doing better now, because he really went through it. Side note, in a weirdly sympathetic move from Abstergo, they eventually arranged with Ajay Rana to use Animus technology to create a digital reconstruction of Monoma and finish her final film, in order to give her the send-off she deserved. For once, it seems like Abstergo actually felt guilty about causing the death of an innocent person. It's the only time I can think that they've ever done that. Ajay Rana. Ajay Rana was Jot's boss, and the only other surviving Brahman character. Ajay doesn't have much relevance in the story, but considering he is the founder of Mysore Tech, a company that is feeding genetic memory information to Abstergo, he may be more important than he first seems. And as discussed above, Abstergo actually did do something altruistic in response to being responsible for the death of someone that Ajay cared about, so Abstergo must have a lot of respect for him. I'd like to see him pop up again in the future. He's an interesting figure. Elijah. Oh boy, Elijah. Elijah is arguably the most interesting character on this list, which is why it is so infuriating that Ubisoft have done almost nothing with him. To cement how little importance they've placed on this character, when I brought him up to my friend recently, who is also a huge Assassin's Creed fan, he had never heard of him, and that says a lot. If you don't know, Elijah is Desmond Miles' son, introduced in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And I know what you might be thinking. When the hell did Desmond's son appear in Syndicate? Well, if you connected enough Animus fragments, the final piece of Assassin intel that you would unlock was a recording from Abstergo stating that a 10-year-old boy had been brought into one of their clinics in New York, and that blood test reveals that he has patrilineal lineage that is exactly the same as Desmond Miles, meaning that he must be his direct descendant. Not only that, but he's also a sage. Grammatica wanted to kidnap Elijah and run tests on him, but Isabelle Ardant stepped in and said that dissecting children was way too far. Instead, she suggested that Abstergo capture him when he's older and strap him into an animus for 50 years. She was a true humanitarian, our Isabelle. However, the Instruments of the First Will got to Elijah first in the Uprising comic series. Instrument agent Richmond broke into Elijah's home and murdered Elijah's mother before kidnapping Elijah. The Instruments told Elijah of his true nature as a sage and how he could be the living vessel for their precious Juno's husband, blah 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 blah. What they didn't realise was that Elijah had heard them murder his mother, and that he was only pretending to go along with their plans so he could take his revenge on them. Elijah was undeniably a creepy child. One time, Charlotte broke into an Abstergo office and found him sitting on a desk munching an apple and talking to her as if they'd met before and that this was all perfectly normal. Bearing in mind that the kid was 12 at this point, it was creepy as fuck. Violet DaCosta, a Templar defector to the Instruments, didn't trust Elijah, believing that the combined nature of being a sage and Desmond's son meant that he was likely to betray them. Juno disagreed, a decision that she would later regret. Eventually, Elijah would turn on his captors, murdering Richmond and aiding Charlotte in finally killing Juno once and for all. The Assassins and the Templars both assumed that Elijah was killed when the lab exploded. However, the last we saw of the weird little dude was him hightailing it into the Australian desert with the Koh-i-Noor diamond, meaning that he's likely to still be out there somewhere. It is shocking to me that Ubisoft introduced a character as significant as being Desmond Miles' son, like the main protagonist's son, who is also a sage, who is connected to Bill Miles, who is still in the series. He's still one of the main characters. He's still there. He's his grandson. And then did nothing with him. Like, he's in the comics, but, like, I just don't understand. I'm like, Bill Miles, we've never seen Bill interact with his grandson. We've never seen Sean and Rebecca, because they know, right? Like, they know. Like, canonically, they know that he existed, because the intel that you get in Syndicate Like, the intel that you're accessing in Syndicate is in Sean and Rebecca's computer because you're in their Animus. They're the ones that are monitoring your Animus session. So any intel that you find in Syndicate is being viewed by Sean and Rebecca. So they know. They know that their friend Desmond has a son. Bill Miles knows that he has a grandson. And they've never done anything with that. Like, they introduced him into a comic book where he has no connection with anybody from Desmond's life. Nobody in that comic book had anything to do with Desmond. Apart from, I suppose, tangentially, the fact that, like, Aaron is married to Harlan and Harlan met Desmond. But, like, that's the closest connection that we've got. Nobody in that comic had any connection to Desmond. So, like, using him in that comic didn't really utilize the fact that he was Desmond's son at all, and now he's just disappeared completely. But then Desmond's like sort of got brought back in Valhalla because he's like the reader now, but we still haven't bothered to acknowledge Elijah. It's baffling to me. I'm like, the fact that Desmond Miles has a son who is a sage and that hasn't been brought up properly in the main games and hasn't even really been particularly well utilized in the comics is truly the most baffling thing the modern day of this series has ever done. That and not using Bassam's modern day character in Mirage. The most baffling decisions that they've made. But anyway, moving on. The last characters I want to talk about are the Last Descendants kids. In August 2016, a young adult novel titled Assassin's Creed Last Descendants was released. This was then expanded a month later with the Last Descendants Locus comic book series, which tied into the novel and into Syndicate. And in December 2016, the sequel novel Tomb of the Khan released and featured the only appearance of Rebecca between Syndicate and Valhalla. I thought I'd just throw that in there. And the series concluded a year later in December 2017 with the final novel Fate of the Gods. The series focused on a group of teenagers who are drafted in by a former Templar named Monroe to explore their ancestors' memories using an animus. In doing so, the kids end up right in the centre of an assassin-Templar conflict and are pulled in different directions as they try to figure out where their loyalties should lie. It would take ages to explain all the kids in the series, so here's a quick rundown instead. Owen Myers, protagonist of the first book, descendant of the Chinese assassin Zhang Ji, Spanish conquistador Alfonso de Castillo, and American assassin Varius. His dad was arrested and imprisoned for the armed robbery of a branch of the Malta Banking Corporation, the company that Charlotte de la Cruz worked for. It's all connected, you see. The man maintained his innocence and Owen swore to clear his father's name. Javier Mondragon. Owen's best friend, descendant of Shay Cormac, Kudgo Cormac, Slaxcaltec, I can't pronounce that, warrior, Chimalpopoca, Chimalpopoca, and Icelandic skald Thorvald Hjalsson. Javier was very suspicious of the assassins to start with, but eventually grew to trust them, and at the end of the series, Javier was offered to join the Brotherhood, and it's implied that he agreed to do so. Grace and David Collins, siblings who are descended from a 19th century slave named Abraham and his daughter Eliza. When they were brought to the Abstergo Eyrie facility, they agreed to work with the Templars. Natalia Aliev, descendant of the Italian opera singer Adelina Patti and Mongolian Templar Bayan. Natalia decided to work with the Templars, but grew distrustful of them. Eventually, Natalia felt that both sides of the conflict were wrong, and the only way that anything would ever get done is if they could learn to work together. Sean Malloy, the other Sean. Sean is descended from Swedish Viking Steerborn the Strong, English landlord Brandon Bolster, and American Pinkerton agent Thomas Grayling. Sean is in a wheelchair, having suffered paralysis after being hit by a drunk driver, and Sean ended up siding with the Templars. And finally, Sebastian Monroe. Not a kid, but their mentor of sorts. He's a former Templar and high-level researcher at Abstergo, studying ascendance events, until he had a fallout with Victoria Bibot and ran off with a stolen animus. He then started working in IT in various high schools and offering kids sessions in his animus. I know, weird and definitely not PVG compliant. These kids were really interesting, and the Last Descendants story was enjoyable. And despite some of them staying with either the Assassins or the Templars at the end, we haven't seen any of them since the final novel released in 2017. And Victoria, who worked closely with them, doesn't mention them in her appearance in Odyssey. And she's also dead now, so there's that. I would like to see the kids appear again someday, especially since they'll all be adults now. They would be part of the Assassin Templar War properly as trained adult agents. But we don't know where they are. But who knows? Maybe they'll reappear one day. And that's it. That's all the forgotten Assassin's Creed modern day characters that I have for you. Did I miss anyone? And who would you most like to see again? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe for more content, and I will see you in whatever I post next. Bye everyone.